I don't scare easy. I want to put that out there before I get into this because I know how it's going to sound, and I don't want you thinking I'm some anxious person who jumps at shadows. I grew up in a rough part of the city. I've handled myself in situations that would make most people freeze, and none of that prepared me for what happened the night of the storm. So I was house sitting for my Aunt Deborah. She lives about 40 minutes outside of the city in this older neighborhood. Nice houses, big yards, the kind of street where everyone knows everyone and nothing ever really happens. She'd gone to visit her sister in Florida for 2 weeks and asked me to stay at her place, water the plants, bring in the mail, the usual. I was between apartments at the time, so honestly, it was a good deal for me too. Free place to stay, quiet neighborhood, decent Wi-Fi. I figured it'd be the most boring 2 weeks of my life, and I was completely fine with that. The first week was exactly that. Boring. Good boring. I'd work my remote job during the day, cook something simple at night, watch whatever on the couch, go to bed. Deborah has this older house, maybe built in the 60s, and it makes noise the way old houses do. Settling sounds, the occasional creak from the floors upstairs, the pipes doing their thing when the heat kicks on. I got used to it fast. By day 4, I wasn't even noticing it anymore. The storm rolled in on a Wednesday night. I remember because I had a work call earlier that afternoon that ran way too long, and I was already in a bad mood when the sky started turning that greenish-gray color around 7. I'd grown up watching storms from covered porches, and I always liked them. There's something about a really good thunderstorm that just resets you. You know what I mean? Like the air feels different after. I made some food, poured a drink, and sat by the big window in Deborah's living room, just watching it come in. It was a good one, the kind where the lightning is constant, and the thunder overlaps itself, and the rain comes down sideways. I fell asleep on the couch around 10, which I did not intend to do. I woke up around 12:30, and the storm was still going, maybe even heavier than before, and all the lights were out. Power was gone. I sat there for a second, just orienting myself. You know that groggy, confused feeling when you wake up somewhere and forget where you are for a second? It was that. I grabbed my phone off the cushion next to me, 22% battery, and turned on the flashlight just enough to find the candles Deborah keeps in the kitchen drawer. She'd mentioned them when she showed me around, said the power goes out a couple times every summer. I found them, lit 2, set them on the kitchen counter, and that was fine. I wasn't worried. It was just a power outage. I was about to head upstairs to bed when I heard the knock. Okay, so let me just explain the layout real quick because it matters. Deborah's front door opens into a small entry hallway, and there's a storm door on the outside of it, the kind with the metal frame and the glass panel. The knock I heard was not from the front door. It was coming from the back of the house, the back door that leads out to the yard from the kitchen. And I want to be clear, it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't pounding. It was just a knock, 3 of them, measured, like someone who was trying to be polite about it. I stood completely still in the kitchen for probably 10 seconds just listening. The rain was so loud on the roof that I actually questioned whether I'd heard it at all. Like maybe it was something falling in the yard or a branch hitting the siding. But then it came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm. Someone was definitely back there. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight toward the back door, and I could see through the small window in it that there was someone standing on the other side of the door. Just a shape really, dark, soaking wet, but definitely a person. I didn't open it. I want to be clear about that right now. I did not open the door. What I did was call out and ask who was there, and a woman's voice came back, muffled through the door and the rain, saying she was sorry to bother me and that her car had gone off the road about a quarter-mile back and her phone was dead, and she just needed to call someone. And I don't know what to tell you. Part of me felt terrible. It was a woman's voice. It was pouring. The power was out, but something about it was just slightly off, and I couldn't put my finger on what. I told her I could call someone for her, that she didn't need to come in, that I'd make the call right now, and she said, "Okay, thank you," and she gave me a number to call. I called it. It rang twice, and a man picked up, sounded half asleep, and I explained the situation, and he said he'd come get her. Okay, fine. I went back to the door and told her through the glass that someone was coming, and she thanked me again, and I could see her step back from the door and stand in the yard. I watched her for a minute, and then I figured I should at least let her know she could stand on the covered part of the back porch to stay out of the worst of the rain, so I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the inner door just to speak through the storm door. She was not standing in the yard anymore. She was standing directly on the other side of the storm door, face about 6 inches from the glass, and she grabbed the storm door handle the exact second I opened the inner door. I slammed the inner door shut and threw the deadbolt back, and I heard the storm door bang open, and then I heard her trying the inner door handle. Fast, frantic, nothing like the polite knocking from before. I backed away from the door into the kitchen, and I was trying to think of what to do, and I called out that I had already called the police, which was a lie, but I didn't know what else to say. She stopped trying the handle. I could still see the shape of her through the window, just standing there in the rain. I want to tell you I stayed calm, but I was not calm. I was holding my phone with both hands, trying to actually call 911 this time, and not drop it, because my hands were shaking, in a way they basically never do. The dispatcher picked up, and I explained where I was and what was happening, and she stayed on with me while I went through the house to make sure every door and window on the ground floor was locked. They were. Everything was locked, and I went upstairs and sat in the hallway with my back against the wall, where I could see both the top of the stairs and the door to the bedroom. The police came in about 9 minutes, which felt like 9 years, and when they got there, they found her in the backyard, sitting on the ground in the rain next to the garden shed, not trying to get in anymore, not running, just sitting there. They talked to her for a while and came back to me and told me she was not intoxicated. She hadn't made any threats, technically, and that her story about the car was actually true. There was a car off the road about a quarter mile down, where she said. But here's the thing they also told me, and this is the part I keep coming back to. When they ran her information, they said she had 2 prior trespassing charges in the county from the last 3 years. Different addresses both times. And when they asked her why she tried to force the storm door, she told them she didn't know what they were talking about. She got cited and released that night. I don't know what happened after that. I stayed at Deborah's for the rest of the 2 weeks, because I didn't want to explain to my aunt why I abandoned her house, but I did not sleep well for any of it. Every creak the house made, every branch that hit a window, I was up. The storm door in the back had a weak latch after that night, slightly bent from where she'd yanked it, and Deborah still hasn't fixed it last I heard. I think about that rhythm of knocking sometimes. 3 knocks, measured, polite, like someone who had done it before and knew exactly how it needed to sound. The weird part isn't even what happened. It's how long it took me to realize something was wrong, and when I think about that part specifically, it genuinely makes me feel sick. I'm a pretty observant person. I notice things, and the fact that I missed it for as long as I did is the thing I actually can't let go of. But let me back up. My name doesn't matter. I'm in my late 20s. I live alone in a ground floor unit in a converted Victorian house. It's been split into 4 apartments, and mine is the front unit on the bottom. I chose ground floor because I have a dog, a 3-year-old beagle mix named Clifford. Yes, like the big red dog, I was in a mood when I named him, and having direct access to a small fenced side yard is worth basically anything to me. The unit itself is fine, older building. The windows are original, which means they're drafty, and the locks on them are those little flip latches that I'm pretty sure a determined 10-year-old could open. I've been meaning to get secondary locks put on them for about 1.5 years. I hadn't done it yet. The storm started around 9 on a Friday night. I'd had a long week, and I was genuinely just excited to sit on my couch and do nothing, and Clifford was already asleep with his head on my lap before 10. The building gets loud in a storm, the old wood flexes or something, and you can hear the wind moving through the walls in this low kind of moan that's actually not scary once you're used to it, but took me a solid month to get used to when I first moved in. I was half watching something and half on my phone when the power went out around 10:30. Clifford picked his head up and looked at me, and I told him it was fine, and he believed me immediately because he is a very trusting animal, and honestly, I love him for it. I've got one of those rechargeable camping lanterns that I keep in the kitchen cabinet for exactly this situation, and I got it, set it on the coffee table, and honestly just kept watching my show on my phone until I got tired around midnight. I let Clifford out into the side yard real quick, even though it was still raining, not hard anymore but steady, and he did his thing fast, because he hates getting wet, and we came back in. I made sure the side yard gate was latched, I locked the back door, I went to bed, that's important. I know I did those things. What I did not do, and I figured this out the next morning, was check the window in the spare room. The spare room is kind of a junk room / office, and I genuinely barely go in there. The window in that room faces the side yard, and it has one of those old flip latches, and at some point, I think during the last big storm we had, maybe 3 weeks before this, the latch had gotten stuck in the open position. I'd noticed it. I remember thinking, I need to deal with that, and then I did not deal with it. Okay, so here's where it gets hard to write out. Clifford woke me up at around 2 in the morning, not barking, which is what made it weird, because Clifford has opinions about everything, and he barks at basically all of them. This was different. He was standing next to the bed, making this low sound in his chest. Not even a growl, really, more like a vibration, and his nose was pointed toward the bedroom door. I lay there for a second, just listening. The storm had mostly passed. It was quiet, and then I heard it. Movement. From the direction of the hallway, or maybe the spare room. Like a slow shift of weight, the floor settling under someone. I told myself it was the building. The building makes noise. I told myself that, and Clifford's chest kept vibrating, and I knew I was lying to myself. I grabbed my phone, no flashlight yet, and I sat up and I listened. Another shift, closer now, or maybe just more obvious now that I was actually paying attention. And then Clifford stepped forward and put his front paws on the bed and looked back at me, and I cannot explain to you why, but that specific thing, him looking back at me like that, made every hair on my body stand up at once. I got up. I want to tell you, I had some plan, but I didn't. I just got up because staying in the bed felt wrong, and I needed to do something. I had my phone, and I picked up the lamp from my nightstand, unplugged it, and held it like I was going to use it if I had to. I opened the bedroom door, and I turned on my phone flashlight and pointed it down the hall. Nothing. No one there. Clifford pushed past me into the hall and went immediately to the spare room door and stood in front of it. Just stood there, not scratching, not barking, waiting. I will be honest with you, I thought about going back to my room and locking the door and calling the police from there. That was the smarter option, probably. What I actually did was open the spare room door fast and shine the light in, and there was a man standing in the far corner of the room next to the window, which was open. And I mean a man, not a shadow, not something I misidentified, an actual person standing in my spare room at 2 in the morning. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there in the corner, looking at me in the light, and I think I made some sound. I don't even know what it was. What happened next went fast. Clifford lost his mind, finally, and started barking and lunging, and the man moved toward the window, and I screamed at him to get out, and he went through the window, and I could hear him hitting the side yard, and then the fence, and then nothing. I called 911 immediately. I was standing in my own hallway, shaking with a lamp in one hand and a phone in the other, and Clifford was still barking at the spare room window. The police came. They found footprints in the mud in the side yard. They found where he'd come over the back fence, and they found where he'd come in through the unlatched window. They never found him. There was no usable image from the street camera up the block. I got secondary locks on every window in the apartment the following week, and I got a real security bar for the spare room window, specifically because that latch is still unreliable. I moved Clifford's bed into my room permanently after that. He had been sleeping in the living room before, and sometimes late at night, when the building settles and makes that low moaning wind sound, I think about how long that man was standing in that corner before Clifford woke me up, how long I was asleep 10 feet away while he was just standing there in the dark. I don't have an answer for that. I don't think I want one. There are certain sounds you just know are wrong even before your brain finishes processing them, and that's the best way I can explain how this started, because the second I heard it, I knew. I didn't question it or talk myself out of it, I just knew. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. My buddy Reeves has a property about 3 hours north, inherited it from his dad a few years back. It's a few acres of land with a small cabin on it that his family used to use for hunting trips. When Reeves got it, he fixed it up some, put in a real bed, got the water heater working properly, patched the roof. Nothing fancy but functional. He'd been wanting to take a group up there for a long time, and this past fall, we finally made it happen. 4 of us. Me, Reeves, my girlfriend, Maya, and our friend Dominic, who everyone calls Dom. We planned it for a long weekend, drove up on a Friday afternoon, got there around 7. The drive up was good. We stopped for food on the way, had that road trip energy where everyone's in a good mood, and the music is right, and you're just excited. The property is down a long dirt road off the main route, and when we turned onto that road, the trees on either side kind of closed in, and the headlights were bouncing, and Maya said it looked like the beginning of a horror movie, and we all laughed. Reeves said the nearest neighbor was about half a mile away, and there was no cell signal once you got past a certain point on the dirt road. He said it like it was a selling point. We all nodded like it was a selling point. People are stupid sometimes. Friday night was great. Fire in the fire pit out front, drinks, conversation, the actual stars visible because there's no light pollution out there. I grew up in the suburbs and I forget every time what real dark looks like the kind of dark where you literally cannot see your hand, and that night reminded me. We stayed up late and went to bed happy, and that was Friday. Saturday, we walked the property. Reeves showed us the trail down to a small creek. Dom tried and failed to catch a fish. Maya took about 400 photos, all of it good. The clouds started coming in around 4 in the afternoon. By 6, it was obvious we were getting a storm, and by 7, it was there. We moved inside and it was fine. Actually kind of perfect in that way, where being stuck inside somewhere cozy while a storm happens outside feels like exactly what you should be doing. Reeves made this chili he'd been planning. We ate. We played cards. The storm was loud on that metal roof, really loud, like you had to speak up to be heard over it. Lightning was hitting close. The thunder was overlapping itself. The whole thing. At some point around 9, the power went out, and Reeves had a propane lantern, so we kept going. It was Dom who heard it first. He put his cards down and said, "Wait, hold on," and we all went quiet and listened. Under the sound of the rain on the roof, there was something else, a sound from outside. And I know this is where it sounds like I'm setting up something dramatic, but I'm really just telling you what happened. It sounded like voices. More than one. Not close, but not far either. Reeves said it was probably just the wind doing something, and Dom said, "No, man, that's not the wind." And he was right. You could hear the cadence of it, the up and down of actual human speech. Reeves went to the front window and looked out, and reported seeing nothing. We tried to go back to the card game, but no one was really in it anymore. Maya asked if maybe someone was camped nearby and had gotten caught in the storm, and Reeves said the nearest established campsite was at least 4 miles out. Dom said maybe they were hikers. I said maybe, and I tried to sound like I believed it. But the thing that was bothering me that I hadn't said out loud yet was that I could hear those voices, and they weren't moving, like not even a little. They were coming from the same direction, the same distance, for too long. I went to the window and looked out and saw nothing at first, just dark and rain and the trees at the edge of the clearing moving in the wind. Then the lightning hit, and the whole clearing lit up for about 1 second, and in that second, I saw 2 figures standing at the edge of the trees, not moving, just standing there, looking toward the cabin. I said, "Okay, everyone, listen to me real calm," and I told them what I saw, and the room changed immediately. Maya grabbed my arm. Dom said, "What do we do?" Reeves went to the back of the cabin to check the back door and said it was locked. Nothing happened for maybe 20 minutes. We turned the lantern down because Reeves said we were basically advertising ourselves, and we sat in near dark listening to the storm and waiting for something we couldn't name. And then it came, the sound I mentioned at the beginning, the one I knew was wrong before my brain finished catching up. It was the sound of the front porch steps, that specific creak of wood under weight. 1 step, then a pause, then another. Slow and deliberate. Someone was coming up onto the porch, and they were trying to be quiet about it. Dom grabbed a fireplace poker off the rack by the wood stove, and Reeves was already moving toward the door, and I was right behind him, and Maya was behind me saying, please don't open it." And Reeves got to the door, and we could hear breathing on the other side. Actual breathing. Or maybe it was just the wind. I genuinely don't know. Reeves put his hand on the deadbolt and looked back at us, and I shook my head, and he shook his, and then he knocked on the inside of the door hard 3 times and yelled, "We know you're there. We're calling the police right now." We were not calling the police. There was no signal. Reeves knew that, and we all knew that, but whoever was on the porch didn't know that. There was a long pause. Then the porch steps again, going the other direction this time, down, and then footsteps in the gravel getting quieter, and then just the rain. We stayed where we were for a long time, an hour maybe. No one talked much. Eventually the storm lightened up and Maya fell asleep sitting against the wall, and Dom and I took turns staying up while Reeves slept because he had to drive in the morning. The next day we packed fast and left and didn't really talk about it on the drive home. I think everyone was processing. What I keep coming back to, what I actually can't shake, is that they were out there in that storm before we heard the voices. They were already there in the trees when we got to the window. And whatever they were doing, whatever the plan was, they changed it the second Reeves knocked on the door and said we were calling the police, which tells me they were aware enough to have a plan. And that means those 20 minutes of silence, while we sat in the dark waiting, they were spending those 20 minutes deciding something. I don't know what they decided or what changed it. I don't know what happens in a night like that when no one knocks on the door from the inside. I'm glad I don't know. I think about it though. I think about it a lot.